Welcome everyone, I would like to show you how to set up your iPad Pro. So this video is for people who, when they click on the power button, they see the hello text in a bunch of different languages. If you're watching this video, you see the hello text, continue watching. If you don't see the hello text and instead you are on the home screen, I have a 40-minute video on how to use the iPad Pro, cover everything. I'll have that video in the description down below. Okay, so the first step is just make sure the iPad itself is on, and then slide up from the bottom where you see this white bar right here. So swipe up, boom, okay, and then from here it will ask for your language. So just tap on your language, it will ask for your country or region, select your region. Now it will say quick start. So here is the deal. If you have an iPad Pro, maybe you're upgrading from an old iPad, you can bring it right next to the new iPad Pro you're trying to set up, and it will allow you to transfer all of these settings from your old iPad Pro to your new iPad Pro. Just bring it close. You're going to see set up your new iPad. Use your Apple ID. I'll blur up my Apple ID to set up your iPad. So you can tap on continue, follow the on-screen instructions. I do have a dedicated video on how to do that. I'll have it in the description, but I'm assuming most people don't have an iPad to upgrade from. So let's just tap on set up manually. From here, it will ask us to connect to a Wi-Fi network. So select the network and then enter in the password, okay, boom. And once you've entered in the password, now it's going to activate your iPad Pro. So this may take a couple of minutes. If you factory reset your iPad Pro in the past, it will ask you to enter in the Apple ID and password. This is your Apple ID and your password. If you do not recognize the Apple ID it is asking you to enter, and let's say you bought this iPad used off of eBay, that means the seller has their old details on the iPad Pro. You will need to contact the old seller to ask them to remove the Apple ID. If they can't, they're trying to scam you, intentionally or unintentionally, so you'll need to return your iPad Pro you got. Now it will say data and privacy, so this just talks about the data Apple's collecting, the privacy concerns. You can tap on learn more to learn more, and we'll talk about everything here, but for the sake of this we'll just tap on continue. Now it's going to ask for Face ID. So this is how you unlock your iPad, okay? You just look at it and the sensors here will unlock your iPad Pro. So you have the option to set up now, and you can see it will say rotate to portrait. So you just rotate your iPad Pro to portrait mode, okay? You tap on get started. Now for me, my Face ID is being disabled because the Face ID on my iPad Pro is broken, okay? So it's not going to work. For you, just follow the on-screen instructions. You'll just need to rotate your head around and you'll be good to go. Now it will ask you to create a passcode. So by default, it wants you to create a 6-digit passcode, but you don't have to. You can tap on passcode options, custom alphanumeric, so that's just letters and numbers. Custom numeric, that's just numbers. 4-digit numeric, so that's just 4 digits. And then don't use passcode. So it's up to you what you would like to use, okay? So just keep that in mind. Me personally, so I'll lower the brightness here, I'm just going to choose don't use passcode. It'll give you a warning, just tap on don't use, and then you'll be brought to the next screen. Now you have apps and data. So earlier, with the quick start, it will transfer your settings like a Wi-Fi network, stuff like that, from your old iPad Pro to your new iPad Pro. But here, it's going to transfer the apps and the data itself. So if you have used an Apple ID or an iCloud account in the past, or you have an iPhone, you can tap on there, restore from iCloud backup. It will ask you to enter in your Apple ID, which is the same as iCloud, okay? Enter in these details, and then you can actually restore a backup from your iPhone, meaning you will have the same wallpaper, the same settings, the same apps, the same data from your iPad transferred over to your iPad Pro. You can also do the same if you have an iPad Pro backup, and I do have a dedicated tutorial on how to transfer apps and data. I'll have it in the description if you would like to check that one out. You also have restore from Mac or PC. This is if you ever created a backup of an old iPad Pro on your computer, and you can transfer the data over. Then you have transfer directly from iPad. I'll have a dedicated tutorial on that in the description. So if you have your old iPad Pro on you, you can transfer the data instead of using the iCloud backup. If you move data from Android, I'll have a tutorial in the description. I made a tutorial on everything, as you can tell. And we also have don't transfer apps and data. So if you don't use any of these options, you want to start fresh, let's tap on Don't Transfer Apps and Data. From here, it's going to say Apple ID. Enter it in if you have one, but if you don't have one, you see Forgot Password or Don't Have an ID. And you see here, Create a Free Apple ID. Tap on this one. Give it a couple of seconds. And now it's just going to give you a form to create a brand new Apple ID. So in this case, just fill out the form. And you'll have your Apple ID you can use. But what if you don't want to use an Apple ID? Well, you have the option here to set up later in settings. So if you lost this option, just go back to this page, forgot password or don't have an ID, set up later in settings, okay? It will give you this warning. It really wants you to use Apple ID. It's required to download apps, so you definitely want to enter it in. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to tap on Don't Use. It will show here the terms and conditions. You can read this if you want to. If we tap on it, it's quite long. I'm just going to tap on Agree. And you see keep your iPad up to date. Just tap on Continue. Now we will ask for location services. So location services won't be on by default for every app. It will, and that will have to ask you for location services. But stuff like Find My iPad, so if you ever lose your iPad, location services will help you track it. I personally recommend you enable location services. But if you don't want to, that's okay. You can turn it off. Siri is the voice assistant. So, you can say, you can activate Siri, say, what's 10 plus 10? It will give you the answer. You can have this on, or you can turn it off. It says set up later in settings, so that just means you turn it off. So I'm personally going to tap on set up later. You now have screen time. So what is screen time? Essentially, every app you use and how long you use the app will be tracked with screen time, okay? So if you're using YouTube for 2 hours a day, it's going to track that. It's going to show you you're using screen time for 2 hours a day. So you can continue with that. If you don't want to see how long you're using your iPad Pro, you can always tap on set up later in settings, which just means you turn it off. You have iPad analytics. So if you're on the older iPadOS firmwares, you can opt out of this. There'll be an option which says don't share, but new iPadOS firmwares, you have to tap on continue. But app analytics, you can choose to share with app developers or don't share. So the facts of the situation are, if you share with app developers, it will use more mobile data, more iPad resources. It's a very small amount, but I recommend you just tap on don't share. You now have appearance, so you have light theme and you have dark theme. Choose whichever one you would like. You can always change this later, so don't worry. Tap on continue. You see welcome to iPad. Get started, and just like that we are good to go. So it's giving me the message about Face ID being disabled because my Face ID is not working. So now what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to turn up my brightness here. Boom. Let's talk about some of the stuff it was showing earlier. So let's go to settings. Screen time. So this is the daily average. This will show you all the screen time you have been using. So for the sake of this video, I do have an iPad Pro. I'm just going to show you an example here. So let's bring this iPad Pro right here. Turn up the brightness for you. I go to see all activity. It's going to show most used, 2 hours 16 a day Firefox, 11 minutes Twitter, 11 minutes Twitch. It'll show all of the applications you've used. You can slide across to view by each day. Okay, so my last week's average was 10 hours a day on screen time, using my devices. So what you all about that, but you can see 14 hours on YouTube, 1 hour messages. It will just show you everything. Okay, it's actually really cool. And it will also sync between your iPhone, your iPad, if you have an iPod, your iPod, and your Mac as well. So just keep that in mind. Now, if you ever want to play with Siri, you see here Siri in search, tap on this one. Listen for Hey Siri, that's just turning on Siri. If you turn it off, press top button for Siri. You can also turn that one on as well. Top button is this button right here, if you're wondering. Okay, so that's just setting up your iPad Pro. If you would like to know how to use your iPad Pro, check out my dedicated guide. It's really long, 40 minutes in depth. There's timestamps so you can skip to the part you care about most. I will have that video in the description down below. And with that being said, thanks for watching. See you guys later. Bye bye.